And this afternoon we are going to be doing some language work with you, specifically around paper 1 and the things that you can expect in a paper 1 comprehension, summary, and your language in context. We're not going to be looking too much at your comprehension and the summary. We will be focusing on advertising and the cartoon, but we will give you as much information as we possibly can in the short time that we have with you. So we're going to start with some instructional verbs and their meanings, and then how we use it in question 3 in advertising. So the first one that we are focusing on is when a question asks you to account for. So account for is in the question. Account for the use or account for this passage or account for whatever it is. It basically is meaning that reasons must be given for whatever is being asked. That's what they're saying. They just give them the reasons for why whatever is there is there. This is always the same in all your papers. You can get account for questions in paper 1, paper 2, I suppose even possibly in paper 3. But definitely paper 1 and paper 2, account for is a question that can come up a lot, and it does. It really does. All you need to remember is say why something is what it is. And I've got an example question. I've taken a piece from a real past paper. I don't know if you can see it at all, if it might be a little bit small, but this is the advert from question 3, analyzing advertising from last year's senior certificate exam. And this is the advert that they were supplied with. It is an advert for the Topsy Foundation, which is a foundation that supports for households which have children in charge of the households, where they've had to be the adults, where they've died from the parents have died from HIV/AIDS. So there's a letter on the table, and the letter is written in crayon, and it's written in a very childish handwriting, and it says, "Dear Principal Dlamini, please excuse Tabo for not going to school yester," and yester's crossed out, yesterday spelled correctly. "He has a very bad flu, NOMSA." So that is the advert. And then it says at the bottom, AIDS is creating child parents at an alarming rate. Help us to help them to live a normal life. Support the Topsy Foundation. Go to www.topsy.org.za to find out how. This is the advert. So here is an example of a question that you could be asked that says account for in this advert. It says account for the use of the crayon in the note in the advert. So why has this advert been written in crayon? And the kind of thing you would want to be thinking about when you answer that is parents normally would write excuse notes for their children. In this case, the child has become the parent, and so the use of crayon shows a child is writing it. It supports the fact that this is a child-headed household and not an adult-headed household. And that's how you would be thinking to answer that kind of a question. You're saying why. Why, they're basically asking why is crayon used, and you've explained why crayon is used. The advertiser is trying to show you it's a child and not an adult. They're proving their point. Right? Then we can move on. The next type of question that you get could be critically discuss. That's another one that comes up a lot. These are your more higher order kind of questions. And when you're asked to critically discuss something, you should be expressing your judgment or opinion based on careful consideration of the evidence for and against something. You need to discuss the limitations, which means the shortcomings or the weaknesses, as well as the merits, the strengths of whatever that something is. And you always provide supporting evidence from the text. That is very important. If we go back to this advert again, there's an example of a question in this advert. The question is over here on this side. If you can see it, it says question 3.2, it says, discuss the effectiveness of the image used by the advertiser. So that would be the exam question for 3 marks, discussing the effectiveness of the image. When they're asking you for effectiveness, they're meaning does it work? Is it effective? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Does it make you want to go out and support this foundation in this case? Does it make you want to do whatever it is they're trying to sell? Are you going to buy it? Does it work? Effective, if ever they're asking you about the effectiveness, they're asking you, does it work? Are you going to fall for it if it's effective? So the answer from the memo for this paper, for that discuss the effectiveness, and look how long this answer is. The ideal answer is, the image is effective as the letter is obviously written by a child, and this is supported by the toys and the crayons surrounding the letter. This links with the text, where children have to assume the role of parents. Therefore, the reader is persuaded to assist the Topsy organization in helping these children lead normal lives. Now, that's a lot of language. That's a lot of words that are being used there. But basically, you are discussing, you are saying, this is what is happening, this is why it's happening, and this is why it's effective. This is why it does work. You don't also always, please, need to try to make it work for you. Maybe you're smarter, sharper, brighter, so nobody can fool you. You know, advertisers don't trick you. But think in general. What are they trying to do? Who are they appealing to? What is their target market? You sitting in a grade 12 exam, this advert is not aimed at grade 12 learners. You don't earn money to be donating to a charity. But the people who do earn enough money, would this pull on their heartstrings? Would this make them want to do it? Would it work for these people? Would it work to get them to donate? And I think that answer was a very nicely worded answer. You also do not need to answer in such fancy English. You don't have to. You can say the same thing in your own words, as long as you make it understandable that you have understood what is going on. So you don't have to say the reader is persuaded to assist. You could say the reader would then want to go and donate money. The reader would want to give money. You've said the same thing. Persuaded to assist, want to give money. It's in essence the same thing. So that's what you need to just look at. Okay. We're going to go on to the next one. The next word that comes up a lot is comment. Comment on. And this one basically, very simply, just means present an informed opinion on. It is often, my kids at school said to me when I said to them, comment on means, and they said, oh, it's my opinion. I said, yes, it is, but remember they do say present an informed opinion. So if your opinion is just nonsense about nonsense, that's not informed, and then your opinion doesn't count. But it is absolutely the one where you get to say what you think and why. Explain why, always. So an example from, there's a different advert now. Same paper, but they've got a different advert. We just look at this quickly. Their text E. It is two hands, a hand reaching out to help another hand. It's like a helping hand. And then across that is written, I am passionate, smart, informed, safe, loving, cautious, open, politically correct, honest, stigma-free, aware, understanding, kind, still learning. I am HIV neutral. It's time to change the way we see, think, and speak HIV. It's not what it used to be. You can help end the stigma. The Stigma Project, and that is the organization that has obviously put this advert together. The Stigma Project is the group, the organization that would like your support, and what they would like your support in is in trying to make people, because HIV, you are considered to be HIV positive or HIV negative, that's how we refer to it. So they went by saying HIV neutral, they're meaning it's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's not a positive or a negative, it just is what you are. And let's move on and let's deal with it and let's live life. That is really what they're trying to get at. So they've put these words, big bold words, and some smaller words, and this helping hand in the background, and this hand reaching out to hold another hand, and it's pretty simplistic, but I think it's quite powerful. So the question in the exam paper for this advert is comment on any 2 techniques used by the advertiser to promote the project. So comment on, there we go, just present an informed opinion. Give your opinion. Now, the memo answer again, because I'll go back to that, what is the examiner looking for? What do they really want you to answer for? The example is the answer that their perfect answer is the advertiser uses the following techniques. Now, there are more than, in any advert, there are more than 2 techniques that are employed by the advertiser to get their point across and their message. So we get to choose. You don't have to discuss all of them, but they've asked for 2. If you do not comment on 2 techniques, you're going to lose marks. You will not be able to get your full marks if you haven't followed the instruction of the question. If the question says 2, you need to discuss 2. If the question in a comprehension, for instance, is speaking about refer to text A and text B, then you have to actually mention both text A and text B. It doesn't matter if you think the same outcome is coming from both the texts or from both the techniques. So you only speak about one outcome, so you've only mentioned one technique. You won't get your full marks. You have to speak about 2 techniques because that is what they've asked you for. So if we go back and we look at what the techniques are, some of the techniques they've used is, the first one is personal pronoun. A personal pronoun is the I in the text. I am passionate. I am HIV neutral. They've used that I, and it's used to emphasize that each person has to take responsibility for removing the stigma of HIV. This is not just somebody somewhere out there doing it. This is me. I must do it. I read it, and it's personal. It's I. I must do this, and every I must do it. So everybody who reads it, they are the I. So that's how they've used the personal pronoun there to help emphasize that this is everybody's problem. This isn't somebody else's problem. I'm not HIV anything. I don't know my status, so it's not my problem. That's not what they're saying at all. The next technique, another technique they've used, are all the adjectives that they've used in this poem. They've got some fantastic adjectives: passionate, smart, informed, safe, loving, cautious, open, politically correct, honest, stigma-free, aware. There's a list of them. And what these adjectives, this whole list of adjectives does, is they describe this positive attitude that the advertiser intends to create in the reader. So they remove the stigma associated with HIV. They want me now to be this I, to be passionate and smart and informed. And these are the kind of words we want to be, right? If somebody tells you you're passionate and you're smart and you're informed, that's awesome. Those are huge compliments. So people would try to be this, and that's why they're putting it out there to try to make you want to be this. So, I am all these things. Awesome. I'm going to be a good person, and I'm going to be HIV neutral. So that's how they're using their adjectives to try and convince you to change, to become HIV neutral. Okay. Then, another technique that they used is they've employed the use of different sized fonts. Most of the words are bolded, but some of the words are written very small, and some of the words are written rather big. And the words that are big are smart, safe, open, honest, aware, kind. Those are really nice words also. Politically correct. Not many of us care whether we've been called politically correct or not. I mean, I couldn't care. In fact, some people try to be politically incorrect. But the good words, the words that we want to aspire to be, smart, safe, open, aware, kind, those ones are big and they are bold. And the most positive attitudes that will have the effect and will effect the change are highlighted in the bold font. And they culminate in the ultimate realization that to help this initiative, one has to be HIV neutral. So that's the biggest bit at the end. I am HIV, and then they put it neutral because it's not positive or negative. Another technique that they've employed here is that they have repeated. They've used repetition, which is something that everybody does. Your parents at home do it. Your teachers do it all day long. People are always repeating themselves, telling you over and have you taken your socks to the wash basket? Did you take your lunchbox to the kitchen? right? And at school, take out your books. Did you do your home? We repeat. You've got to write this down now. Teachers, why do we emphasize things? Because we want you to do it. We want you to notice it. We want it done. And they've used repetition in this advert, and they've repeated very big at the beginning, I am, and then towards the end, I am. And that I am, the repetition of the I am, appeals to the individual so that he or she could seriously take responsibility for destigmatizing HIV. It's me. I am this. And it sounds very positive. So that repetition is, it's you. You must do it. I must do it. Another technique that they used in this advert is the technique of the visual, the picture of the helping hands, the hand like trying to help up somebody else, the stretching out hands. And in creating an HIV-neutral society, collaboration has to happen. Support is crucial. We can't have this HIV-neutral society if it's one person, two people. It's got to be everybody, and we're going to have to support each other and work together, and that's what that helping hands visual creates. It also, they haven't actually reached each other, the hands, so maybe they're saying we're not there yet. We haven't gotten to this society yet. We're just on our way. We're reaching out. We're trying to do it. We're trying to pull people into this. And then just to the point again, the question said you must discuss two. So it doesn't matter which of the two you choose. You can choose any of the techniques. You can speak about anything, but you must speak about two. That is important. The instruction is important. So that's how you get your full marks for that question. Right, moving on again. If we go to the question word, the instruction verb, compare. That's another popular one. And compare, it doesn't just come up in English, it will come up in all your subjects, in all your exams. That is to examine qualities or characteristics to discover resemblances or similarities. Compare is usually stated as compare with. You are to emphasize similarities, and compare is usually focusing on similarities. That's not to say that you can't also do a contrast, because maybe sometimes to justify your answer and to make it appropriate, you do need to actually bring up the differences, compare the differences, mention how the differences are different. But usually, as you can see at the bottom there, when we want the dissimilarities, we speak about contrast. What is the contrast between it? That's where you're highlighting the differences. That one is red and this one is blue. The same is that they're the same size. That's the comparison, that's the similarity, but the color is the difference. So contrast is usually dealing with the unlikeness, and compare is usually dealing with what is the same. What is the same in them? And mention it. You've got to mention it. You've got to say it's the same because they are both the same size. They both are so big, that big, whatever it is. You've got to speak about what those are. Compare questions, usually the answers are there for you. You've just got to go find them and state them. Then, if we move on, back to discuss. We spoke about critically discuss a little bit earlier, but critically discuss is a big one. We like to discuss. The term discuss directs you to examine, analyze carefully, and present considerations in favor and against a particular issue or point. And that's important. Discuss does not mean talk. You don't turn to the person next to you and have a conversation. That's not what discussing is about. Discuss means on your page you write a discussion. You say what is this and what is that, what is for, what is against, what are these points and those points and all the points together, and you put it out there and you have your discussion on your page, not your discussion with your friend next to you. That's a different discuss. So this type of question calls for a complete and detailed answer. This is to say that your response requires you to investigate by argument. You should sift through the arguments and the evidence to support them, and you give reasons for, and you give reasons against, and you examine the implications. It might also mean that sometimes you have to provide evidence for the side that you don't choose, for the evidence that you're not really sure is correct. But again, you find your evidence from the text. So you can say, it's this, and it's this, and it's this, and it's that, and he's this, and he's that, and he did this, and he did that, but not so much this because this was more important. This was bigger. But there's the evidence for this, there's the evidence for that, and that's how it all comes together in the end. Okay, so discuss questions are not usually your 1-2 mark questions. They're usually your 3-4 mark questions where you must really give detail and analyze nicely. Then you have questions that ask you to explain. Please explain. In these answers, you must clarify and interpret the material you present. In such an answer, it is best to state the how or the why. Reconcile, which means make agreement in any differences in opinion, and where possible, state the causes. The aim is to make the circumstances which give rise to whatever you are examining plain and clearly simple. That's what teachers try to do during lessons. They try to explain things to you. And the point of explaining is to make something as plain and simple as possible, so that you can understand this is exactly what it is. So if you must explain an answer, you must break it down to the simplest, plainest way that you can make people understand what it is that you have understood by this. Another question that they sometimes ask you to do is to illustrate. And we all learn that illustrations means drawings, and you have illustrators in books and this illustrate in a language exam does not mean draw. They don't want you to draw with pictures, pencils, create art. What they're trying to make you do is draw with your words. Create a picture with your words. It requires you to explain or to clarify your answer to the problem by presenting an example. If you need to illustrate something, you provide an example for it. It's not drawing a picture, and it's not just you give it, you show me, make me understand how. Kind of like analogies and parables and all those wonderful ways that you can do it. But you give your example to prove what you are saying and to make your explanation more clear. And we are nearly done with this. The next one is justify. And this is a big one because often they'll ask you a question and then just at the end they'll say justify, all by itself. Question asked and then justify. Just that statement. Justify means that in your answer you must prove or show adequate grounds for a decision or conclusion by supporting it with sufficient evidence and argument. In such a response, evidence must be presented convincingly. And that's what justify just means prove why you are right. Whatever you have said, whatever you have answered to, prove why. Prove why that is right. And you do need to be convincing because sometimes you're making stuff up and you need to make people believe that you know what you're talking about. So justify is a big one, and it really just means prove it. Prove it to me. And the last one that we're going to speak about is place in context. This is one that you get asked often also in all your papers, and it just means state what has just taken place to result in what is happening in the given extract. And you briefly state what is happening in the given extract. So it's more important, you will be given a piece of a text, you'll be given something that you're supposed to look at and deal with, and then place in context means explain what led up to what's just happened. This snapshot that you've got, that you've been given, what has led up to that snapshot in time. And state briefly what is happening also in the little extract, but what led up to it. Then you've placed it in context. Now I understand what's happening. You come to class and you say, I can't give you my essay today, I'm going to give it to you tomorrow. Then I need you to place that in context. Why? Why must I now give you that extension of a day? You've got to tell me. Well, you see, the last week I've been going home and having to play hockey and then clean the house and make supper and all these things. So I haven't had a chance, and then my dog gave birth on the original copy of my essay, so I didn't get to edit it because it all had now puppy mush on it, and I had to... You've got to tell me your story. Help me understand why I can't have what I asked for today. That's placing it in context. And then briefly, I can't give it to you today, miss, can I hand it in tomorrow? then I get where we are. We're placed in context, and I can say congratulations to your puppy, but I still want the essay today. Okay, so that is more or less some of your important verbs, your instructional verbs that you will find in papers. It's by no means an exhaustive list. It's just the tip of the iceberg as far as lists go. There are loads and loads of instructional verbs that you need to deal with and you need to understand. But those are a few of the bigger ones that sometimes we struggle with. We don't always understand what is needed by them. So those are the ones you need to just really be aware of and try to always explain as much as you can. Always kind of think that the examiner is an idiot. And so you've got to treat this person like they're an idiot and they don't know what they're talking about. And so you must answer as clearly as you possibly can and with as many words as you possibly can so that you can make the examiner understand what is happening. Right, and I am going to hand over to Anique. And Anique, who's been very quiet next to me, hasn't said much, is going to be wowing you with some cartoon work and some more.
Are you opening my slideshow?
Yes, I'm going to open your slideshow for you. I see we do also have some WhatsApps, and we'll see what they are. Let me see if I can click on one. We've got Berg River High watching us. And somebody asked a question, how come there are specific answers for open-ended questions? We don't think the same. No, you don't think the same, but you should kind of be thinking along the same kind of vein. You should have a similar you can say it in your words, but you should get to the same ultimate answer.
You have to write what you know the teacher wants you to write.
Yes. Yeah.
Just for Matric. After that, you can have all your own opinions.
Yes, then you can be very clever. And hello, ma'am. Okay. They're enjoying the lesson. Thanks. And there's somebody else. And somebody's experiencing technical problems. I'm sure they'll sort you out. And thanks, Kensington High. We can see you there. And Düsseldorf. Awesome. Over to Anique.
Cool. So we've been talking about looking at advertisements. And now I want to talk to you about looking at cartoons. But what you might not realize is that what we've been doing the whole time is we've been looking at something that the teachers like to call visual literacy. And if you unpack those words, what we're looking at is your ability to read pictures. And I am convinced that the people who are writing Matric at the end of the year are much, much cleverer than their teachers have ever been at reading pictures. So, for example, if we look here, if you've got a pen and paper out, maybe you can write it down, maybe you can say to your friend next to you, but I'm sure that you all know what picture number A means. You don't know why you know what picture number A means. It's just because you've grown up in a world where we use these signs to communicate certain things to you. And when we test you on visual literacy, what we're looking for is to see that you understand how these signs work. Has anybody sent in a message to tell me what A means?
Anybody
out there?
They're watching. But nobody's given an answer
typing.
For A yet. Okay, they're typing.
Are they typing?
They're typing.
I want answers for A, B, and C.
Okay, what's A, B, and C? A, somebody has said, means pause.
Oh dear. A does not mean pause. A means play.
A, there's another answer. A means play.
A means play. What does B mean?
There we go. B, anybody know what B means?
B means pause.
Yes.
Okay, and C, if you're from the olden days and you used to use tapes, it means fast forward. But if you're from now, which all of you are, it means skip. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's try some more to show you guys how good you are at visual literacy without even realizing it. Okay, what does D mean, everybody?
Anybody got an answer for D?
For D.
Okay, people are typing.
Lots of people are typing. It's because I know that they know the answers to D.
D means happy.
D means happy. Okay, and maybe some of you want to write me an essay to tell me that D means happy and it's the one that you use for your friend when you're trying to show them that you're not cross with them, but you're asking them to do something for you. I don't know. Emojis can get really complicated. What does E mean?
Okay, I've got an answer for F.
Oh, I see one
from
for
Blackheath
E as well.
High. Okay, E. This is going faster than me now.
You see, they know all the answers to this
They
because
do.
they're good at visual literacy.
They absolutely do. E means mind blown.
It does mean mind blown.
Yes.
So my mind is being blown right now by
Yes.
how fast these WhatsApps are coming
Yeah,
in.
and everybody's saying F is angry.
F is angry. This is a
Everybody.
universal language.
Blackheath and all sorts are all saying it.
So actually, when we're testing you on visual literacy in paper 1, we're not testing you on stuff that you don't know. You do know how to answer these questions. The problem is that sometimes I can see when I'm marking that you know the answer, but you're just not explaining it in the right way, so I can't give you full marks. So we've already looked at some of the instructional verbs, some of the question words that you need to understand what they mean so that you can answer the question properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example from a paper 1, and we're going to look at some of the cartoons, and I'm going to tell you some of the things that you need to know to be able to get full marks for those cartoons questions. So this is our first cartoon, and we can see that there's a car here. It's a very sad-looking car. Maybe it's a taxi, and the one guy says, "You can't park here, dude," and the other guy says, "Why not?" And then we get to frame 2, and we can see that there's a sign there. And it's part of our visual literacy to know that that sign with the P and then the person sitting in the chair means this is parking for disabled people, this is wheelchair parking. You can't park in this parking if you are an able-bodied person. And just in case we didn't know that, the guy says, the sign says disabled only. And then they get out of the car and they look at it, and we can see that it's a real old skadonk. This isn't a happy car at all. And he says, is anyone going to say this is not disabled? And he's not talking about the person driving the car, he's talking about the car itself. So the first question says 4.1, why does the cartoonist use informal register? And it's for 2 marks. So if we don't know what informal register is, then we're already a little bit stuck. So let's take a look at formal register. All of these notes are going to be online, so please don't try to write this stuff down. Okay. But register is all about the words that you use and the context that you use those words in. So you can see over here we've got a little table, and it says formal register and it says informal register. So if you're talking to the principal of your school or to your teacher or to the Queen, I always use talking to the Queen as an example, then you need to use the formal register. And that's not the same way that you're going to talk to your friends. So if you meet the principal, you might say, "Hello, sir, how are you today? How do you do?" But if you go to your friend at break time and you say, "Hello, how do you do?" they're going to laugh at you because actually you should be saying, "What's up?" So you need to know how to use the right kinds of words and the right kind of language and the right kind of tone in the right context. And that has to do with your relationship between the person. So one of the things that makes informal register informal is that there's a use of a lot of slang. I don't know. If you can imagine saying it to your teacher and your teacher won't understand what you're talking about, then it's probably slang. Like, I don't know what lit means, but I'm sure you do. Okay. So if we look at this cartoon again, we can see that we've got examples of informal register happening here. He says, "You can't park here, dude." You would never call the Queen dude. That means it's informal register. Okay. And in the last one as well, you see he says, "Is anyone gonna say this is not disabled?" Okay, so we can see that there's informal register here, and it wants to know, why are we using this informal register? And as I've said, register is determined by context, so we can tell that these guys driving in the car, they are not, one of them isn't more important than the other, they are friends, so it tells us about their relationship. So you can see the answer that we see in the memo is the informal register shows casual or everyday context or setting or relationship between the 2 characters.
And somebody did on the WhatsApp line did say it's informal because that is everyday language.
Oh, I love it that
so
everybody
well
is participating.
And
that's actually a better definition than my definition because it's more simple, right? So informal register, everyday language. So you can see that one of those ticks on the slideshow, the informal register shows casual or everyday language. There's a tick there because now you've told the marker, I know what informal register is. And then you've shown me that it talks about the relationship between the 2 characters. It's giving me insight into that relationship. So that's 2 marks for your visual literacy part of your paper already. And I think judging by all these WhatsApps that are coming in, you guys are on the right track.
They are, yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. Now we get to question 4.2. And question 4.2 is harder because it's for 3 marks. And what question 4.2 says is discuss how humor is created in this cartoon. Okay, so we're back to that word that Heather was talking about earlier, the discuss word. And when you see 3 marks, you know that you have to write quite a lot in order to get your marks. If you just say, it's not funny, you're not going to get any marks for your cartoon question, okay? And I do find often that when I'm marking, my matrics put up their hand and they say, ma'am, that cartoon was really not funny. And then you ask us for 3 marks to explain the humor in the cartoon. So we just need to clarify, if you look at the slideshow, that when you're asked why something is humorous, when you're asked why it's funny, I don't necessarily want you to be rolling on the floor laughing. What I want you to do is I want you to tell me why it is witty. It's like, oh, I see what they did there. I'm in on that joke with the cartoonist. So if you look at the first cartoon there, I don't know if you guys can see it, it says danger, mime field. And there are a whole bunch of mimes walking around in a field. But usually we get scared of mine fields. So it's a terrible pun. Like, your reaction to this should actually be to groan in pain because it's such a bad joke rather than to be rolling around on the floor laughing. But your answer in the test would be, I see that this is a pun. They're playing on mime and mine, and that's why it is humorous. Notice that we don't ask why it's funny, we ask why it is humorous. Okay, and there are other examples there, but we won't go into those now. And one of the big kinds of humor that they like to ask in exams, especially in the cartoon section, is they like us to know about satire. Okay, so satire is when you use ridicule, sarcasm, or irony to make a critical comment about society or politics or an individual. So I'm sure you've all heard older people complaining about how children don't play anymore. They're just attached to their tablets and they're always on their phone and it's all electronic. And what is technology doing to the children? And we can see over here in this cartoon, there's a sign that says, caution, children playing. And they are playing. They're playing on their phones, but they're not playing in the way that we would imagine they should be, with the basketball hoop and the swings and the seesaw in the background. So this cartoon, we would say, is satirical because it's criticizing something about the way that we live today. It's criticizing the overuse of technology. And if I ask you, why is this humorous? You say, I see what they did there. They're making it look like the children are playing, but actually they're saying that's a bad thing and they're criticizing technology. So you need to be able to do that. Another one that they like to do when they ask why the cartoon is humorous is that they like to look at irony. Okay? And we have to remember that irony is when we have the opposite of the intended effect. So we can see in this cartoon over here, we have an example of situational irony. We've got the boy on the bridge and he is running away from the bees because he does not want to be stung. And he's about to jump into the water and the water is full of jellyfish. And what's going to happen to him? He's going to be stung. So in trying to escape from being stung, he gets stung. It's the opposite of the intended effect, which means that it is irony. And we can also talk about dramatic irony, which is when the audience can see something that the person in the novel or in the cartoon can't. And in this case, we know that he's going to jump into jellyfish. We want to go into that cartoon and say, no, stop. You're going to be stung by jellyfish. Don't jump in there. That's dramatic irony because we know and he doesn't. So irony and satire are both ways that we create humor in the cartoon. So now we need to discuss why this cartoon is humorous, the one about the broken taxi. And discuss questions are always going to be 3 marks, and it means that your answer should be quite detailed. So one of the sort of pieces of advice that I would give you is that if you're trying to answer a discuss question and you want to make sure that you write enough, you must use the P method. Some people call it the Peel method, and you use it in essays, you use it in your paper 3, you use it in your paper 2, and you use it in your paper 1 for comprehension and for visual literacy. And in order to make sure that your answer is long enough, you need to make your point, you need to explain your point, and you need to give an example from, in this case, the cartoon. So discuss how humor is created in this cartoon. We start by making our point, which is that the cartoon is using satire. And it's satirizing the abuse of law. In other words, look at all these people who think they can just park in disabled bays. Don't you hate it when people do that? So it's trying to make us see that critique, that satire. So we get our point for seeing that it's satire. Very good. Now we know how the humor is created. Ah, cartoonist, I see what you did there. Then we have to explain it. We say the character who wears the cap knows that he is misinterpreting the road sign. The parking space is actually for the physically challenged. And that's a euphemism there, guys. And then finally, in order to get our third mark, we need to use evidence from the text. So we say, in frame 3, we can see that his car is disabled, but cars can't actually be disabled. So he's twisting the rule and twisting the vocabulary in order to get away with doing something that's actually bad, and the cartoonist is satirizing that. Here we have another cartoon. It's a Madam and Eve one. So when we see Madam and Eve, we know we're always going to be getting satire. So we hear a voice coming from outside of frame 1, and it says, "Give me $10 or I'll pull the trigger." And being South Africans, we assume immediately, this is a hijacking. They want to steal the person's car. But then, in the second frame, we see a man, and he's not holding the gun to the women in the car. He's holding the gun to his own head. And this is unusual and a little bit disturbing. So he stands there. They give him a whole frame just to stand there so that it can make an impact on the reader. And then the lady driving the car, whose name is Madam, she gives him 10 rand. And he says, "Thanks, have a nice day," which is formal register. Okay, he's being very, very polite, much more polite than we would ever expect a hijacker to be. And then the grandmother in the final frame says, "You have to give him points for creativity." So question 4.3 wants to know, explain the absence of the armed man in frame 1 and frame 4. So in other words, tell me why we don't get to see the armed guy in frame 1 and frame 4. But now you would be very surprised at how many people struggle in reading cartoons because they don't know some of the basic features of what a cartoon is. So just for a moment, let's take a second to look at what we call these things. The first one is a speech bubble, and you can see it is a bubble coming out of the woman's house. Out of the woman's mouth. So we know that she is the one who's speaking. She's the one who's saying, "Come on now." Okay. Then every single one of those little blocks where we see a picture is called a frame, and it shows the passing of time, and we read from left to right. Then we also have movement lines. You can see those. John is writing with his pencil, and you can see that he's writing because they're movement lines. As I said before, this is stuff you all know already. This is stuff that you all know already, but you don't know why you know it. And we can tell that he's writing because of movement lines. And then finally, coming out of the cat's head, we see a thought bubble, which is different to a speech bubble. And obviously, this is Garfield's thought bubble because cats can't talk. So we're looking at frame 1. And because the question is for 2 marks and it wants to know about frame 1 and frame 4, we're going to have to make sure that we mention both of those frames to get our full 2 marks. So there are 2 different explanations for why the car guard isn't in the frame. Oh, why did I say car guard? The hijacker, there we go. Okay, so in frame 1, the armed man is still approaching the car, and it shows that the occupants of the car will be caught off guard. It also creates humor by leading the reader to assume that the people in the car are being hijacked. So obviously you don't have to say all of that. You could probably say one of those 2 things and you would get a mark for it. The memo isn't always set in stone. It's a marking guideline. And then in frame 4, the armed man makes his getaway. The absence of the armed man forces the reader to focus on the facial expressions and the words of the characters in frame 4. So we're just going to look at our last question. And once again, this is a 3-mark question. And it says the big instruction that we've already looked at twice today, comment critically on how the visual and the verbal aspects of frame 3 convey the cartoonist's message. Okay, so we've got 2 things going on here. We've got the idea that we need to comment critically, which Heather has already spoken about, and we have the visual and the verbal aspects. And we're also talking about frame 3, which means you can't give me an answer about frame 4 or frame 1, because then you aren't reading your question properly. So I just want to take a moment to point out the idea of facial expression and body language. This is where we go back to those emoji that we were looking at earlier, because what you need to show me is that you understand how body language communicates a message and how facial expressions communicate a message. So often it says, I know he is cross because of his facial expression. But what I want to know is, I know he is cross because his mouth is turned down and his eyebrows are together and he's red in the face, and this shows me that he's cross. You're showing me that you know how to decode the way that pictures work. So again, comment critically. If we take a look at the slide, I would always encourage you guys, again, when it comes to commenting critically, to use the P method to explain. So again, you need to make your point, you need to explain your point, and you need to give an example. So if we look at the answer for the one about the cartoonist's message in frame 3, the verbal is thanks, have a nice day, and then we also have the picture that we need to look at. So the point that you would make when you're commenting critically on the verbal and visual aspects, there are so many things you could say. This marking guideline one says, this cartoon is satire, again guys, satire, showing how the armed man threatens to kill himself, thereby emotionally blackmailing the characters in the car in order to get money. His attitude is nonchalant or casual, and this shows how comfortable criminals have become with taking advantage of their victims. Now, you could take a completely different tack. You could say, this is a really sad cartoon because it shows how desperate people are and how used to, turning to crime they are in order to survive, and it's a satire of South Africa. You can read it in many different ways. But that's your point. That's your critical comment. You're using the P in the Peel method. Now, you need to make sure that you're backing up that answer by explaining it and by giving evidence, which is our other two E's in the P method. And here we would do those two things together because we're talking about the visual and the verbal. So if you look at the answer, it says, this is shown through the visual as the man's facial expression looks relaxed. He is not distressed in the way one might expect someone to look when they are holding a gun to their own head. And then we can also see this in the verbal, thanks, have a nice day, which is unexpectedly polite, like he has just conducted an everyday transaction. And if you want to sound clever, you can say that that's quite formal in its register. So that shows that you've learned all the things that we need to know from this lesson. So that was an example of a typical 10-mark cartoon question, which you would see under visual literacy in your exam. So I hope that having looked at this, you guys have realized that actually you know how to read pictures already. But what you need to do in your paper 1 is that you need to make sure that you pay attention to your instructional verbs, and that you give us answers that are full enough, and that you show us how you know what you know. So if I've taught you one thing today that I want you to remember, it's that when you have to answer a 3-mark question, like a critically discussed question, use the P method. Make your point, explain it, and give an example. And if you do those 3 things, you will make sure that you write enough to get the best possible marks you can for your visual literacy in paper 1.
Yes, and there is somebody who said they were taught the Peel method. It's the same thing. So you just, that's what you need to do. Have a method, have a way, have a reminder, a little checklist, and always say as much as you possibly can. Yeah. Don't rush through the paper 1.
Just to that person who was taught the Peel method, hi. The L at the end of Peel is for link.
Yeah.
So when you're answering a question about a cartoon, you're not going to link your answer to the next answer in your paper. But when you're writing an essay, yes, every single paragraph must have a point, an example, and an explanation, and then link to the next paragraph. So you can see how useful this concept is, because you can use it in paper 2 in your literature essay, and in paper 3 in your argumentative essay, and also just in cartoons and comprehensions, and then you don't need that L.
And thank you very much. Anik and myself have had a lot of fun this afternoon with you. I hope you've learnt a lot. But it's time for us to say goodbye, and we hope you tune in again for the next English Home Language session, coming soon. Thanks. Bye.